Dr. Deborah Waterbury is the founder of Love Everlasting Ministries, and she's the author of 12 Bible studies. But her success in ministry came long after she was caught and exposed for having multiple affairs. And today, she travels the country sharing the message of God's grace and redemption. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
I went into detail into your story, but for friends that didn't kind of catch that short time ago, we're talking about 6 pairs of sandals, putting ourselves in some women's shoes,
yes,
and women's ministry, but really your life came to a sudden screeching stop.
Yes.
Because all that you were doing privately got exposed.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Well, well, you pretty much just did. That's exactly what happened. I've been a Christian since I was 11, and I was raped when I was 12 by some friends in the neighborhood, and then that kind of became my identity. I hid that. I hid the rape because I blamed myself. I thought it was something that I had done, but my identity then was wrapped up in how I could feel treasured and special. And when you're 12, when you're a child, and this happens often, when something's done to you, then that becomes who you are.
Yeah.
And so
that carried through your young
through.
adulthood.
It did.
You know,
it wasn't until college. I was really a good girl for a while. Then I got to college, and it seemed like sex was one of those things that once you've crossed that boundary, it's very easy to cross it again. And it also became a way that I felt that I had some power or control, which had been taken from me, which is that's very standard when it comes to someone who's been abused.
And you had advanced in many ways with respect to, a mom, wife, in the church, serving in different capacities, a worship leader at a mega church as well. But yet that past continued to
resurface,
live itself in the present. So when you were exposed and it all, the curtains were drawn and all was out there, all the plates dropped to the ground, as you said last time you were with us, but your husband stood with you and the Lord stood with you. What was that like to know that there was someone with skin on, who would stand with you?
Yeah, that was, and my husband is a saint. And when I say he stood with me, bless him, we stood in the same house. That didn't necessarily mean we were standing together. He just allowed me to stay. We had a lot of years of trying to get past a lot of pain. Jeff and I have been together we've been married for 33 years, but we've been together for 39 years. So we pretty much grew up together. Both of us had a lot of problems. Nobody has an affair, and there's no problems in marriage because one person's wonderful and the other person's horrible. There's problems relationally so Jeff and I had a lot of work to do. But what we finally realized independently and then came together on was that we had to stop looking at each other to try to be Jesus. Because Jeff can try as hard as he wants, but he cannot be Jesus to me. And I can't be Jesus to him. And we were trying to, and that's what people do. We get married because we think this person's gonna make us so happy. And then look at all that pressure, because nobody can do that. Nobody can do that. And so then we keep looking for someone who can, when we already have the only one who can. And so my husband and I now, we do a lot of marriage counseling outside of my ministry, and we do some manhood, womanhood conferences as well. And what we tell men and women continually is that until they stop looking at one another to make the other one happy and start looking to Christ, who already did that, your marriage has no hope. But there is nothing but hope in that truth.
And as a result of that, God gathered all of your broken pieces together. And it took years. I don't want people to misunderstand that when we go through situations, no matter what it is, it takes time for God to bring it all together if we will give him those broken pieces. As a result, you have Love Everlasting Ministries, and under that umbrella, you're doing everything under the sun. I mean, tell us about some of the ministries you've launched, and not just here in the United States, but abroad.
Well, we do a lot of work in Africa. Zimbabwe and Malawi are our most favorite place, my most favorite place. I just drag everybody with me to those places. I have wonderful friends in those countries. And as I've gone to Malawi and Zimbabwe over the years, I do these big women's conferences, and And they would, women would come, thousands of them from villages all over the place. And I thought they were all coming to see me, but they weren't. They were coming to see and hear about Jesus, but they were bringing their children because they got fed.
Right.
Because Malawi was just declared
the second poorest country in the world.
It is the second poorest, and was just declared a disaster area by the World Health Organization because of hunger. And I realized that there were women who are bringing their children because there's just no food.
Right.
And so we just recently are about to launch our very first school in Blantyre, Malawi, for women, for widows, destitute women, to teach them the trade of tailoring, so that we can give them an ability to be able to take care of their children. And that's what they want. We as Americans, we want to give people, we were generous. We're generous by nature. But when you give money to someone, you don't really solve the problem.
Right.
And they don't want our money, really. If you talk to any of my African friends, they don't want my money. They want to give me everything they have. That's the amazing thing when you're there. But the idea that I would help them get an education, they can't even get past the exuberance that I will empower them in that way, and that what we do for them will do that. So the Reap What You Sow project is that project for those schools. And we launch our first one in April.
Now, when you talk about women's ministry for a moment, comparisons between what you see here in the States or in the West and places in the developing world where the resources aren't necessarily the same, and maybe the culture is definitely not the same. But you say the needs of women are the same worldwide.
Absolutely. And women's ministry, to tell you the truth, is much bigger, much stronger in Africa, in Malawi and Zimbabwe in particular, that I can speak to, South Africa as well. These churches, because they know the value of women, and even though culture there is a little bit different, the culture doesn't mean that they look down on women, because they don't. As a matter of fact, women are put up on a pedestal there that Americans could learn something from. They recognize that women are strong and they're powerful, and they're the ones who are going to do the work in the church. And so women's ministry is strong and alive in those churches. And so everything that I do in terms of writing this book and empowering women and who they are in Christ, the feat that it takes and takes hold of in those countries, in Africa in particular, is no different than here in America. Sometimes it's even stronger there.
In 6 Pairs of Sandals, you talk about women in the Bible who have used their gifts and abilities to really impact and influence other people. Kind of talk about the responsibility women have. No matter what background, you have a situation that you've shared with us, and it had to be painful to go through that. But we all have a story that can help someone else. So talk about the need for women to open up and train and equip other women.
That's such a good point, because transparency is the big deal. That's a big deal, and it's a big deal for women in particular. I mean, it's a big deal for men too. But we spend a lot of time as women just weaving a whole lot of webs of appearance because we all got to look like we got it together, and we've got about 4,000 things to take care of, and that many people who are depending on us. And so being transparent about our fallenness and what we've done wrong seems like the wrong thing to do, when in fact in women's ministry it is the absolute right thing to do. So you hit on such a good point, Valerie, that is, we have to be willing to be transparent with our sisters, because it may look like they have nothing going on, but they've got something. Everybody has something they're hiding. And unless we can put ours out there and do so in the peace and security that Christ has our back, then they're not going to feel the freedom to do the same thing. And that's the only place where freedom occurs, is when we can lay that out and say, let me tell you how Christ took care of this even before I said anything. It's amazing how many people are freed just by hearing someone else say, I know exactly what you did, and because I did it, or I've been through it, or I've seen it. And then the peace that comes with that. So that's where women's ministry is. It really is just being able to be open with one another.
We've got 1 minute, and out of the 6 pairs of sandals, which, do you have a favorite?
I want to say Deborah, but that's not it. It's Tabitha, the servant. Really
Why is that?
Because we just minimize that. We minimize that and think we have to be the one that's up on stage. And That is, Jesus said the first will be last. And he also was the one who got down on his hands and feet and washed the disciples' feet. When none of them would, they'd sit there with dirty feet for like the rest of the day because nobody else was going to do that. It is about service, and Tabitha really does exemplify that and how we can serve one another.
And what's the big takeaway that you want people, men and women, to take away from looking into the 6 pair of sandals?
Looking outside of self and realizing that everything we do should be about somebody else. If everything that I've been through and everything I do only serves to try to make myself happy, then it's for nothing. But if everything I do and everything I've been through goes to serve someone else and exalt Christ, then it's for something.
Wow.
It's eternal.
Amen.
And that is where we will end today. To connect with Deborah, you can go to loveeverlastingministries.com or go to harvest-tv.com. It's our website. We'll link you back to hers for a copy of 6 pairs of sandals and where you can get yours and how you can connect with her ministry. Coming up later, Pastor Charles with your prayer request, but next we're going to hear from Brian Bush sharing how Israel is celebrating the new year. We'll be right back.